Welcome to the Gain Momentum podcast, focusing on timeless lessons from senior leaders in hospitality, travel, food service, and technology. My co-host today is Michael Goldrich, and our special guest today is Rod Jimenez, CEO of SHR, an Access company. Rod, how are you?
Adam, good to see you.
Good seeing
Hi,
you.
Michael.
Great seeing you. So I'm wondering, to start things off, to make sure we're all on the same page, give us the elevator pitch for SHR, all its product suite, and how it's really helping hotels, get onto the next generation of hotel technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So SHR provides a suite of interoperable applications to help hotels have a simpler life and free them to do more. And by more, we mean more hospitality. Those applications include central reservations, revenue management, and CRM. And we also have a series of ancillary services around that, like digital marketing and web development, that enhance the impact that those applications can deliver for hotels. And I underline to ask your question specifically about how we help hotels or how best we are positioned in terms of helping hotels, is that from the beginning, and we'll get into that a little later as far as the timeline, but when we decided to expand our suite of products, we really were very focused on delivering something that allowed hotels to have a suite of applications that would be friendly to each other, right? And by that, we mean, can we create things that allow hotels to create workflows? For example, if this happens in this application, then make this application do something else. So that interoperability is sort of at the core of what we want to do. The ancillary services, and then the human aspect of it is the service that we bring that surround the delivery of those applications. So that's SHR in a nutshell.
What does SHR stand for?
It stands for Scepter Hospitality Resources. That's a long story. If we we may take half of the podcast if I tell you that long story. But the brief version of the story is that at one part in our history, we created a joint venture with City Developments Limited out of Singapore. We were Whiteboard Labs. They owned a subsidiary in Denver that had been around for a long time called Scepter Inc. And so when we created a new entity into which we contributed the technology and then they contributed growth capital, one of the requirements was that the name was going to remain Scepter. And so then it was not going to be Scepter Inc. It became Scepter Hospitality Resources, which is a mouthful, a challenge from a logo perspective, all of those things. So pretty soon after that, we rebranded and we said, you know what, let's just refer to ourselves as SHR. And so that's how SHR and the new logo and the new domain name was born.
Okay. Yeah, I always wondered. Thank you.
Yeah.
It raises an important thing to talk about with you, Rod, is that you are a senior leader who has this timeless experience that goes not just with SHR and where it is, but going back many decades. And one other, I guess, company that you've been involved with is TravelClick and iHotelier. Could you speak to a lot of your previous experience prior to SHR and how that's guided your leadership in the world of hotel technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in banking. And so I worked for Bank of America and for Chase for a total of about 10 years. And so that was a very interesting start because it gave me a really good view of a number of businesses. And from a corporate banking perspective, you're looking at the mechanics within those companies in those industries. And they're all the metrics, all the key metrics at the end of the day end up being the same, right? If you talk about EBITDA and the growth of your revenue and things like that. But the mechanics inside of that, the levers that you can push or that you can pull are very different, right? And so ironically, I started working with hotels, even in that role as a banker. And then a friend of mine who was working for NASA at the time, he's the friend that you have that you're always saying, oh, one day we should do this, and so we were both very into technology. And so we were always comparing notes about what was going on. And this is obviously going to date me because this is late 1990s. So nascent stages when it comes to the web, right? The internet had been around. Working for NASA, he was using the internet, but he built one of the first few websites out there for his lab at NASA, the Hypervelocity Impact Test Facility is what he was working in. And so that started the conversations about, hey, something is going to happen here, right? This may be big. And our vision was so small. I mean, we thought we were thinking really, really big because we said the company that all that ended up generated was called web advertising, because the idea was, hey, web advertising is going to be just as crucial as TV, radio, and paper advertising. So everybody's going to need a website. And that was the extent of our gigantic vision, right? Let's just get ready to give everybody a website. Well, little did we know that pretty soon everybody was going to be able to do that, right? And so, but by the time all of that started changing in terms of everybody could do it and just web development shops popping up everywhere, we had already moved into more and more of the application development world. In fact, our tagline at the time was, what does your website do? And we just wanted our clients we wanted to ask that question of our clients in terms of saying, we can build you a website that allows you to do something. And that something, as you can imagine, was very small at the beginning. But as the technology evolved, then all of a sudden we could query a database from a website. And again, coincidentally, back to hotels, we started working with a couple of ad agencies that represented the tourism agencies in South Carolina and in Rhode Island. And as you know, probably one of the most active members of a CVB are always the hotels. And so all of a sudden we end up dealing with hotels, and a couple of early clients just pushed us. In fact, one of our clients said, pulled out the business card and said, it says here, what does your website do? What does my website do? Make it do something. So he had a bunch of golf courses around him. And so we started with that. We started an online tea time request, right? And so it generated an email in the back and all that. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, why couldn't we do this for hotel reservations? I get emails all the time about asking, do you have availability for this date? And we would have he would show us a thread, including, 10 emails going back and forth. This is obviously before PCI days, the credit card in the last email saying, okay, book the reservation. So anyway, so that all led to getting into that world more and more and more. And then we ended up developing the early version of iHotelier. And so we just thought, when we launched iHotelier, the tagline was an online reservations engine. So that's all we thought that we needed to worry about. And I'll confess, even back then, I said the web is the new GDS. Why do we care about even connecting to the GDS? Well, a couple of years later, we ended up having to connect to the GDS to be competitive. And so before we knew it, not knowing it really that was what we were creating, we had a CRS. And iHoteliers started just focusing on the website and then the online reservations only. And then we added all of the channel connectivity, and then we added GDS, and then we added call center application. And so it became a CRS, right? Again, we didn't set out to build a CRS. We were just answering and following what our clients were saying. You know, a client would buy iHotelier in the early days, and then all of a sudden come back and say, look, this was doable when I would get 2 or 3 reservations a day online, but that's getting more and more and more. And now I'm getting 100 reservations a day online. I don't want to swivel around and go to my PMS and connect. So then that was the next thing. It's like, okay, now we need to look at connectivity. And as you know, that's been the pain for any startup in the hotel industry, right? Realizing that you have to go figure out how to interface with Opera, right? or with, name the PMS, right? And so, and back then, there were several initiatives about creating standards and, all of that. But yeah, so that's how iHotelier was born, and that's how iHotelier became a CRS. And then in 2004, that was acquired by TravelClick. And so when we sold to TravelClick, we sold the IP of iHotelier, and then we all went to work for TravelClick for a while. And then it's coming out of that then Whiteboard Labs was born, which is the company that then did a joint venture with CDL, which became SHR. So that's kind of the timeline there.
That's really interesting. So when you were building that first booking engine, what was a problem that you encountered that you were surprised by? Like one of the first things that spent a lot of time to work through?
Well, this is interesting. It's a great question, because I remember it would sound crazy to a young person, but one of our issues became we're selling an online booking engine, and hotels don't have a website. And so I remember the first trade show we went to, our opening line to engage with the hotelier walking by our booth was, does your hotel have a website? And they're like, no, that we don't think that's, in some cases, the answer would be, we're a luxury hotel. We deal with our guests, one-on-one and in person. And so then we needed to figure out, okay, well, how do we package this? So then we created this thing that we called, look, we give you everything. We give you your online lobby, which is your website. And we give you your online reservations agent, which is the booking engine. And then we give you a marketing tool. And this was one of the coolest things we did at the time. It's that we allowed hotels to use the data in the CRS to remarket to hotels. And so we created an email engine where they could query the database and say, well, I just need to send this offer to people from Florida, for example. And I'm just my hotel is in Florida. I'm going to create an offer for guests in Florida. And I'm just going to say, this is the local special or whatever, right? And so to answer your question, Michael, that was a challenge, because we basically needed to enter the business of building hotel websites and doing early digital marketing so that we could sell the booking engine.
That's so interesting, because I'm encountering a similar thing with like generative AI in terms of hotels saying, oh, we want to deal with people directly. We we don't want to use that technology, is going to make it more impersonal. It's sort of similar sort of discussions that we're having now.
Very, very similar, because I remember the answer that we gave back then, it's applicable as an answer to the question you just brought up with regards to AI. It's no, we want to free you up so that you can be more focused on hospitality, more focused in real life conversations. Instead of being on the phone booking reservations, you free up your folks to be ambassadors for your hotel and offering hospitality to your guests.
How did you convince them if they didn't believe in it? Like, was there like stats? Did they want because hoteliers are notorious copycats. So once you get a couple on, then they're like, oh, just point to what so-and-so is doing. Like, how do you get?
Yeah, it was a combination. So we did want to create case studies and show people data. But one of the biggest things that happened for us at the time, this was the year 2000, I believe, to maybe late 2000, is we got the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs as a client. And to your point, a lot of hotels would say, well, I don't want to be your guinea pig, who's using the technology? And we would say, well, the Broadmoor uses it. And they're like, okay, that's my due diligence. If it's working for them, I'm in. Yeah. So that was our biggest, point that we used to convince hotels, is that the more that we got, it was like, yeah, we have the Broadmoor and this hotel. And those early, it was so early and things were changing so quickly that we have very close relationships with those early clients, as you should. And so they became good. They were always very willing to endorse what we were doing. And so that helped a lot.
Yeah, the phrase that comes to mind and why I brought up your experience and your history, Rod, is history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I believe that's Oscar Wilde, and it's so important for people to hear about the challenges you were solving during the dot-com boom, which are now, as Michael said, being repeated with similar conversations with AI. And to fully bring that into 2025, let's talk about SHR and the conversations you're having with what features are being requested that are on the forefront, as well as what challenges you're solving for right now. So adaptive websites, interoperability of workflows, what's happening? What's on the forefront?
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing that's different this time around is that the resistance is there, right? In some cases, like Michael brought up, but we see more of, there is a bit of a skepticism, and so it's like, well, just don't tell me that you're focused on AI. Just show me something, right? Like, because I think people are tired of the AI in every tagline and in every banner and at every booth, and then they scratch the surface and there's not a whole lot in there. So we started using AI much more seriously when we got into the RMS world, right? So that came together with our expansion of being a distribution only company when we only had one product, the CRS. And that was, many years. So from 2010, when we launched the current CRS, which we branded as Windsurfer at the time. And then 2018, when we decided, okay, we're going to strategically sort of zoom out and we're going to go from being just distribution to being revenue generation focused, right? And so to do that, we said, okay, what's all, we know that we're very connected to the PMS, but the PMS is, as I always told people, is behind the front desk. We're outside of the front desk. So how do we stay outside of the front desk for now? And what other pieces are there in terms of revenue generation? So obviously, revenue management was a very quick answer, right? And then CRM was the next answer. So we set out to work on that. And as I said earlier, we wanted, and then we said, but let's make sure that we don't just have 3 isolated applications that don't talk to each other and really don't offer any of that value add in terms of the interoperability and perhaps even sharing of data and all of that. So what that led us to was to say, okay, so how do we accomplish that, right? So that I always joke that we didn't want integration at the invoice level only, right? Like it's 3 completely separate applications. They don't talk to each other, but it's one invoice, right? It's like, so we wanted that communication between them. So that started to lead us down the path of automations of workflows and RPA. And so we said, okay, this makes sense because we can create the workflows and have things happen in one application because the trigger actually was in a different application. So that was, machine learning. And obviously, as you know, RMS is very heavy algorithmic, right? And so that really got us down that path. And there are a couple of guys in our company that are very focused on this. Primarily David Moneo, who's our head of product. And so then the question started shifting to, okay, that's very, sort of static, right? And rules based. Can we start doing something that's more generative AI driven? So we started with the kind of the mundane side of things, like inside of the CRS, we have assistants that can help with the translations. For example, as you know, GDS has a lot of restrictions in terms of what the character limitations are and how it needs to be formatted and all that. We were wanting to take hours of work away from a hotelier's plate, right? And translating things or taking a very rich description from a website and then turn it into a GDS description, and the ability to say, make it sound more business-like, right? And things like that with description. So that's all sort of not viewable or impactful for the guest, but is very impactful for the hotelier. And then gradually we're moving more and more into the idea of, we think that the future is agents, right? And it's the AI, not just, following rules, which is very useful and very, time saving, but actually making decisions, right? And analyzing things and saying, okay, well, this is what I need to present now. So for example, the very simple example on some of the things that we're working on with an initiative that we call Concierge is the idea that you can open a separate panel, and you've got a conversation going over a chat, online chat, and then if I say, are there any restaurants around your hotel, then I can then now on the other and the new panel that opens up show you where the location is for those restaurants. Or the minute I say, do you have availability for July the 2nd? Then I pull up the booking engine and I start guiding the process. The AI starts guiding the process of actually booking a reservation. It's still happening on the booking engine, but the dialogue between the hotel and the guest is being mediated by an AI chatbot, right? And then the next step of that is, for example, if I say that I'm interested, I'm considering your hotel, but I'm wondering about kids' activities. then the idea of saying, okay, I can go and search in the RMS all of the reviews that are positive about kids' activities at my hotel. And then as I'm answering the question, I'm actually displaying positive reviews about, oh my gosh, the kids club is fantastic at this hotel, so-and-so guest on this date, and then another one underneath that and another one underneath that. So it's early days. I mean, it's changing so fast, like that every day feels like, a new day. And that's a little scary from a company perspective, because it's intimidating to make a decision to go full force ahead in a particular direction and start making investments. Right. And then all of a sudden, everything is different, right?
I got two questions. So agent as a service, like, have you guys thought about that? And then one of the things I imagine with you have so much, if someone goes onto your suite of technology, they probably only use about 20% of it for about 80% of their tasks. Now, with the new computer use capabilities, in theory, people will be able, hoteliers will be able to use pretty much all of your functionality, which will allow them to drive so much more opportunity. So have you thought about those two things in terms of your services?
Yeah. So I think ultimately the direction would be agent as a service, right? And trying to figure out how to get there. And yeah, you're absolutely right. One of our big objectives is basically utilize a lot of the power that it's there in the applications, that it's going unutilized, and let the AI use it, right? So for example, all the data is there to see, what type of reservations you're booking and all of that. But the idea of having the application tell you, hey, out of your current book of reservations, these 100 reservations are categorized as highly probable in terms of cancellations. So then the next question becomes, okay, that may be where the human comes in, and the hotelier goes, okay, I need to go and set up a campaign for these people in the CRM and offer an upgrade or something. We need to bring that risk down. And if everything goes well, maybe even get to a commitment place, right, where they now booked on their non-refundable rate or something like that. So that, to me, then, if we have it to where the hotel has to take the action, it's like, okay, first it went from the data to now the guidance, right? Like, we did the work of analyzing the data for you. So here's the outcome of that. You need to make a decision as to how to act on it. The next step is, well, let's set up the initial rules, and then let the AI decide that it's time to trigger an offer to these clients, and to trigger an offer that maybe includes an upgrade, or includes a 10% discount, or includes a cocktail at arrival, depending on the value of that reservation, right? And so you start to replace the thinking and the decision making. Again, it's still very scary for a lot of people, because even when you talk, even just with RMS, right? We have situations where hotels are very hesitant of turning autopilot on, because it just feels weird to let the machine price your hotel.
Yeah. No, it all comes down to human in the loop. So it's autopilot, but you're still in control. Yeah. That's the message.
We have, in the RMS, we have a function that's called a strategy builder that basically lets hotels just intervene wherever they want to intervene in the setting of the ultimate rate that gets published.
Okay, so the world is changing fast, and you have to take a risk on what features to develop without knowing where we're going to be with artificial intelligence 1 year, 2 years from now. What is your thought process behind deciding where to lead a multinational company?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a complicated. I mean, it's probably from a managerial perspective, one of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now. Right, our approach has been, now as part of the Access Group. In the Access Group, we always talk about the concept of the two-way door. Is it a two-way door or is it a one-way door? Right.
That's a Jeff Bezos.
It
Yeah,
basis framework, right, for decision making, and so we use that a lot. And when people are talking about decisions, a lot of the very frequently the question comes up is like, is it a two-way door? Yeah, it's like, well, then let's move fast. And if it's a one-way door and we're going to bet the future of the company, then we need to be very careful on the analysis and all of that. So with that in mind, and with the idea that the Access Group is a collection of not just companies within divisions, but divisions in multiple industries, we get to benefit from what others are doing and learning those lessons. So we get to avoid mistakes or move faster because we avoid the learning, or we jumpstart or bypass portions of the learning curve. So within that framework, Axis is working on an initiative called Evo that is aiming to bring a very accessible use of AI across their applications. But obviously, all of that needs to trickle down to the individual company, the specific segment, and the specific industry. So in our case, what we're doing, taking advantage of leveraging all of that, is trying to take risks that are two-way doors and saying, look, if this doesn't work, we can always shift. And because of the rapid change, what we're banking on is that we're not going to come out empty-handed out of any effort we undertake, because we're gonna save the learning, right? It's like, if it pivots this way, whatever we learned over here, it's going to be useful. And so we're making those smaller bets and taking those risks. That's something we do. For just to give you an example, right? Our concierge concept of the double panel. Well, now there is, Chat GPT operator, which is sort of basically the same thing. So it's like, well, could we do it? Could we deploy it a lot faster if we use that, right? And so, but all of the thinking and all of the analysis is not wasted. We just don't want to sit still and not be experimenting and challenging ourselves with what could be possible. And so, I mean, as you know, in my mind, one of the coolest things in terms of, what hoteliers can get is that data is always so hard to get and to analyze. And this idea of using natural language to ask for your reports, right? These revenue meetings at hotels are data heavy and PowerPoint heavy and all that. How about I just pull up my screen and we'll start asking questions about how is last week compared to this week? And then have AI just build a report on the fly. And then it's like, what about versus last year? And so that to me is something that, it's already there. It's just that we have to embrace it in hospitality and bring it to hotels. Again, I keep highlighting the overall objective of saying, we want to free you up to be as good a hotelier as you can be when it comes to the guest, when it comes to creating that experience and that memorable interaction.
Right. How do you address the GM or the revenue manager just says, what about hallucinations? And they're afraid that just one or two data points will be wrong, and therefore they lose confidence in absolutely everything. How do you address that? Because I think that is why you can't actually do it in those meetings, because you can run those reports, but then you need to have the human in the loop that validates that, because that's actually the person's job. So I think that people's job in the future will not be to do the work. It is to ask the questions and validate the work and think about the work. It's critical thinking.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And it is one of the, data quality is a huge thing, right? And so we're obviously trying to demonstrate to hoteliers that when, the data that you're feeding the model is the right data, that you reduce the chances of that. But it is part of that learning curve, and it's, maybe we're going to have to run things in parallel a lot, right? That you still run your same revenue meeting and you still have the AI window open to maybe it's a question that's not answered here. And then you go, well, let's go ask. And then you get a crazy answer and you go, well, that's a crazy answer. We're not going to trust it, right? So it's a process. We just want to, as a company, we want to be moving and, we want to be moving forward with this. And then we want our clients to, at whatever pace they choose, to kind of come along on that journey. But it's very different because it depends on, and this is what we also shouldn't forget as a technology company, that no technology is great in itself, right? Like, you need humans to embrace it. You need humans to alter process, to change ways of doing things. And that's all in the category of change, with which, as you know, we all tend to fight a lot, right? And so the question is, what are going to be the biggest things that force change, right? We saw a lot of that with COVID, right? And the shrinking of teams and the consolidation of a commercial strategy team into a smaller team, instead of separating marketing and sales and revenue and distribution. And so that's a change that I think, in my opinion, it's been helpful in terms of having a set of humans at the hotel that mimics how the technology is sort of becoming interconnected. And then, so if the humans are interconnected, they're going to be sort of more friendly towards, like, the idea of leveraging what the technology can do.
Right. Like, for me, it's mindset. It's a mindset to remind people it is a tool. It's not some sort of magical thing. It's a word generation machine. It does like out calculations, but it's a tool. It's a tool that facilitates everyone to be better than average. That's number one. But also is allows them to facilitate this work. So once people can understand and make that switch, that it's not some amorphous thing that's just going to replace them, it is actually something that enables them to get so much more done. Because if you talk to any hotel team, any hotelier, they have a list of things that they can never get to. They do not have enough time.
Yeah.
This is a technology that creates time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it allows them to get all the stuff done. It's all about mindset.
And internally, so we always have to remind ourselves that, hey, wait a minute, we also have processes. We also have clients that need more of our attention. And we also have a shortage of resources and fixed number of hours in the day. And so under this Evo initiative inside of Access, we're trying to give our teams the ability to save as much time as possible. And sometimes it's really mundane thing, right? If I ask you, hey, can you tell me what we paid this vendor 6 months ago when we did this, project. Well, it seems like a very innocent ask, but now I'm going to have to stop doing what I was doing. I need to go dig it up. I need to make sure that that's the correct number. I need to send it to you. Again, inside of our big operational applications that we have internally, those are the things that we're creating that somebody in HR can just say, when did Adam start with this company? Oh, January 1st, X date, right? That's now a 2-second task versus I got to pull up this file and I got to go look and then make sure that that's the correct record and then publish it. So we as technology providers can also be beneficiaries of that so that we have more time to work with our clients in the more strategic type of conversations.
So this all rings in my mind towards the thought about customer education, and to what Michael was saying, what you're saying, going back to the simple trade show ask, do you have a website?
Yeah.
And to sort of close things out here, what are some of the biggest obstacles you've encountered with hospitality customer education, and how are you solving that challenge to help bring your clients and other hotels forward into this next generation of more efficient work processes, conversational reporting, as you've talked about, and better selling tools?
Yeah. So one of the challenges it's not a new challenge, but it resurfaces when you're bringing something new, is change, right? That personnel changes a lot and people have views on how to do certain things or what the priorities are. And so in some cases, we may be pretty far along a conversation with it in a very sort of same wavelength type of approach. And the excitement is there and the willingness to try something. And then there's a change, right? Oh, I'm leaving. This person is coming. And then you start from zero, right? And then now what tends to happen is that, we follow that person to wherever they're going, or they call us when they get there. It's like, okay, let's continue the conversation. But here, that's a challenge. And it's been there all the time because hotel industry tends to have a lot of rotation in terms of people, but they don't leave the industry, right? So our job is to make sure that we form strong enough relationships so that they bring us into the new conversations. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is, the challenge that Michael brought up, which is credibility, right? How do I know that this is right? How do I know that it's not going to, mess things up? How do I know that it's not going to say something crazy if it's an AI driven chatbot, right? And not just a pre-programmed set of answers, right? If the question is, are you close to the airport? The answer is yes. If it's just all a library of questions and answers. That's way safer, right? And so people are going, I've heard horror stories, and I don't want my hotel to be a viral story about being rude to somebody or worse, disrespectful, or said something like, because the AI goes crazy, right? And so that hesitation is still, and that's why we're trying to sort of take baby steps in terms of like, look, it's your GDS descriptions, right? It's translations, it's calculations that you need anyway. It's things that we're going to add a layer of validation so that humans can say, yes, I'm agreeing with this. So those are probably the two most, the two that come to mind as I think about that question, Adam.
Awesome. That's that's a very important timeless lesson baked in there about how to go about solving that and really bring that forward. Rod, any final thoughts before we close out?
No, thanks for the invitation. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think it's exciting times, right?
Yeah.
I forgot to say this, and I was thinking Michael was or I don't know, either Michael or you alluding to this, the fear of what AI is going to do to our jobs and all that. And I really do think that idea that AI is not going to steal your job. Another human that knows how to use AI is going to steal your job. And so that's kind of the philosophy, is like, let's try something. Let's educate not just your staff, but your guests. And so I think that we haven't seen most of the changes that are impactful to our industry are still to come. And so that's exciting. It's a good time to be in technology, and I think it's a good time to be a hotelier, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's becoming almost where the job of a hotelier at the senior level is you have to know technology. And that is another value add to the industry, is because not only do you get to learn about service and you get to work in cool places, but you get to learn about all these incredible tools that are under the hood and how that they actually connect into the architecture, the systems architecture for a hotel.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think that the days of the GM just only focusing on the ground day to day are gone. You're exactly right. They're technologists now, or they need to become.
And also data scientists,
Yeah.
to Michael's point.
Yeah.
Rod, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a delight to talk with you, and really, really fantastic words of advice based on your career, as well as where we're going in the near term with artificial intelligence.
Thank you both. I enjoyed it. Appreciate the invite.
Thanks, Rod.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Gain Momentum podcast. To stay up to date, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Gain Advisors, head to gainadvisors.com.